Hello everyone, my name is Nik Infernis, and welcome to the final, for now, Miscellaneous review. I'll talk about what's going to happen with this show at the end of the video, but for now, let's talk about the two theatrically released Chocolate Factory movies, Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory from 1971, or 72 depending on who you ask, and Charlie and the Chocolate Factory from 2005. Now, the interesting thing about these movies is that while they are very different, they're also so similar that I had to recombine their videos into one video. Yeah, that was the original plan was to have them was actually to have them as one video, then I split them up into two, then I realized, wait, these movies are way too similar, so I put them back in one. So that's why they're one video again. So first, let's talk about Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. We'll talk about Charlie later. Now, the nice thing about this movie is that this is a very whimsical movie, which I can understand where some people might find that to be a bit cheesy, but I can be down for a whimsical feel-good time, and the movie definitely provides that. And I'd say there are two things that contribute a lot to that particular aspect. The first is the score. The score does an excellent job at immersing the viewer in the moment, whether it be from the excitement of Charlie finding the last golden ticket or from the wow factor of exploring the chocolate paradise. That's what I call the room with the chocolate waterfall, by the way, the chocolate paradise. Because let's face it, for someone like Augustus Gloop, that entire room is absolutely paradise. The other thing that's really contributing to the tone is the performance by the late Gene Wilder. Rest in peace. His performance as Willy Wonka manages to be both warm and inviting while also being mischievous and untrustworthy. And it makes for an interesting character because you never really know what he's going to do next or how he's going to react to anything. And his performance even has some really funny moments just because of how little it seems that he really cares, or how deliberately deadpan some of his deliveries are. Like when they're in the TV room and Mike is getting shot into the Wonka vision, any normal person would be like, "No, stop, come back!" But he's like, "No, stop, come back." Probably not exactly like that, but you get the point. So yeah, just an excellent performance, and I can definitely see why some people prefer him over Johnny Depp, though Johnny Depp did have his, own good parts that I'll talk about. Another thing I really liked was the relationship between Charlie and Grandpa Joe. So you can just tell from, all their interactions that, Grandpa Joe understands what Charlie wants and wants nothing more than to help him achieve to help him achieve that. He understands Charlie's dreams, wants to help him achieve it to the point where he's even willing to let Charlie spend his own money, or where he's willing to spend his own money on a chocolate bar for Charlie, and even comforts the kid when it ends up not being a golden ticket. Now, of course, this also led to the whole thing with the fizzy lifting drinks, but they were able to get out of that situation unharmed, so give or take. And the last thing I'll say that's good about this movie is that I do like the message about, being good and doing the right thing. Because when you think about it, all the kids except for Charlie lost because of their own behavior. They brought their punishments onto themselves because they were a bunch of brats. Charlie, on the other hand, proved that he was an honest and trustworthy person, and therefore won because Wonka realized that. Now, there are some issues with this movie, and no, it's not because this is an older one. I honestly don't really, get the counter argument of you just like the newer one better because of the fact that it's the newer one. Like, honestly, that's kind of a hollow argument because I like Spider-Man 2002 and The Amazing Spider-Man more than Far From Home, and Far From Home is the most recent one, but I like those more because it has less problems. And I like this one less because it has more problems. For one, there are quite a lot of pointless scenes in the first act. Like, they really should have just focused on the 5 kids. Maybe a little bit of Charlie's school life. I'm fine with that. But any of the side plots of the other people trying to get golden tickets, that just feels like pointless anecdotes, at least to me. Like, I don't really see much of a reason for them to be there, especially because none of those characters ever show up ever again. Another thing is that, you know, after the characters leave the different rooms, the kids that had Oompa Loompa songs in those rooms are completely ignored. Like, we don't see them ever again. The movie just kind of forgets that they exist. And even then, their punishments don't really feel deserved in this one. Like, here they just feel like mildly annoying brats. You don't really hate them, except for Veruca, but the movie makes you hate her in the wrong way by having her voice turned up to 11. So I guess in a way, her punishment did feel deserved, though they definitely went about making us hate her the wrong way. But in terms of Augustus, Violet, and Mike, like, yeah, they're annoying, but they don't do enough the movie doesn't do enough to make the audience hate them. So, and I guess you could even say this about Veruca as well. When they do eventually get their punishments, despite the fact that they bring the punishments onto themselves, it still leaves an air of, did they really deserve that? Then there's the songs. Now, I'll give the movie credit that two of its completely original songs are actually great. The first one being Candyman, I think is what they call it. It does a good job of introducing the audience to this version of the story. It's very, upbeat, and it's a very fun and upbeat song. And the other one is Pure Imagination. And that one just contributes to the movie's overall charm and whimsy and does a great job at it. I don't know if Gene Wilder actually sang the song or if someone dubbed over him, but if he did sing it, he did a great job. And the Oompa Loompa songs are memorable and catchy. I'd be surprised if they weren't, considering that most of their lyrics are Oompa Loompa Doopity Doo over and over again, to the point where they just had Hugh Grant do that for the marketing of the new movie. But for what they are, they're fun. The rest of the songs are where my issues really come in. First of all, Cheer Up Charlie just feels pointless. Like, that song has no reason to exist in the movie whatsoever. I Want the World feels just reeks of, we had no other way of getting Veruca to go down the garbage chute because we replaced all the squirrels with geese. And I've Got a Golden Ticket would be great if it was just Grandpa Joe. Young Peter Ostrom could not sing. And because of that, it really brought down the song. Like, honestly, I wouldn't even have this problem if they just removed Cheer Up Charlie and I Want the World and just had Charlie not sing during I've Got a Golden Ticket. Like, Grandpa Joe's actor, whose name I didn't bother looking up, did a good job. Like, he's a great singer, especially for, someone who's a much older man. I wish I could say the same about Peter Ostrom. At the time, he's probably a much better singer now, but at the time, nope. So overall, I can absolutely see why this movie is a classic. It definitely deserves that title for being just a feel-good movie, but there are some things that it could be doing better. Now let's move on to the more recent adaptation, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. And yes, I called it an adaptation and not a remake because there are a lot of things that this movie does differently to where I'm not entirely sure if I can really call it a remake. It doesn't feel so much like a remake, more than a separate adaptation of the same thing. And like I said before, the reason why the two different parts of this video got recombined into one whole video is because both of these movies are very similar. In fact, this movie has a lot of the same pros. There's, the actor for Willy Wonka is still charming in a new way. The relationship between Charlie and Grandpa Joe is still very sweet. And the message of being a good person and doing the right thing is still there. So, in general, like I said, these movies are very similar. So, why is it that I like this one a ton more? Well, there's two major reasons. For one, this movie actually fixes a lot of the issues that I had with the Mel Stewart version. For one, there's no filler. Like, there's not a single bit of screen time that's wasted in this movie. Everything feels like it has a point, and I swear if anyone brings up the Indian Prince scene as filler, I will slap you. I'm only half joking when I say that. That scene both establishes the massive influence that Wonka has had, while also symbolizing the almost decline they had. Notice how the Chocolate Palace started melting as soon as his secrets started getting stolen. And by he, I mean Willy Wonka. The palace literally starts melting right as Wonka's secrets start getting stolen and repurposed. At the same time, we actually get follow-ups to each of the different kids' punishments since we see them all leave the factory. And at the very least, they're a lot more deserving of their punishments in this version. Like, I didn't think that the kids in the original movie deserved to have such life-altering punishments, but here you actually hate these kids. And at the very least with Veruca, it's for the right reasons. It's because she's an ungrateful brat and not just because she won't shut up or just... Old Veruca was really annoying in case you can't tell. But the kids actually do things and act in ways that make you hate them, so their punishments feel a lot more satisfying. And the only songs here are the ones taken from the book, those being the Oompa Loompa songs. And trust me, we'll talk about the Oompa Loompa songs later. So, it fixes a lot of my issues. But it also makes a lot of what I liked a lot better. For one thing that I actually didn't realize in the original movie is that Grandpa Joe is the only grandparent with a personality at all. Here, they actually, give the different grandparents a small role to play in the movie. Of course, Grandpa Joe is the one person who used to work at Willy Wonka's chocolate factory, so has a personal connection. That's a change I really appreciate. Grandpa Josephine, who I get mixed up with Grandpa Georgina, so I'm sorry if I do that in this video. Grandpa Josephine is the one to encourage Charlie in face of Grandpa George's realism, which, by the way, Grandpa George is my favorite grandparent in this movie. He's a curmudgeon and a realist, but also has a heart of gold and knows when to, tell, and knows what to say and when to say it. Like the scene when Charlie actually considers giving up the golden ticket, Grandpa George tells him something that's easily my favorite line in the entire movie. Only a dummy would give something like this up for something as common as money. Are you a dummy? Like that is such a nice scene, and it's really true as well. Like you shouldn't let once in a lifetime you shouldn't give once in a lifetime opportunities up just because of financial reasons. Like I understand that, but if you can only experience it one time in your life, like if you're only able to do it once in your life, then yeah, go for it. And Grandpa Georgina is just pure. Like she has some really funny lines in this movie, like the "I love grapes" and "I think there's someone at the door." But even though it's implied that she has dementia, she still has some moments of clarity that are really sweet and heartwarming. Now, on top of that, the dad's also in here, so that also helps with the family dynamic. Plus, the moments that, him and Mrs. Bucket get with each other, like especially when she's comforting him after she's laid off, really just the family in general, like the family relationships in the original movie were already heartwarming, but the fact that everyone plays a role in this movie just helps it make it a lot more, I guess, believable, but a lot more sweet than it already was. The movie is also visually great. Like you can tell they really tried to go as practical as possible. They obviously can't go practical for everything. I wouldn't be surprised if the boat ride was CGI. But like the Chocolate Wonderland, I probably called it something different in previously in the video, but the Chocolate Wonderland, that's completely practical for the most part. The Oompa Loompas are practical. The squirrels in the nut room are practical. Like it's amazing how much effort was put into this movie to make it as visually amazing as it is. And yeah, the Oompa Loompas are all practical. Massive props to Deep Roy for all the work he did on this movie. The fact that he filmed each scene multiple times and then they just layered it over each other, that takes some real dedication, not to mention he learned to dance. You gotta give him props for at least that. Of course, he couldn't sing, so Danny Elfman had to dub over, but that's perfectly fine. And of course, speaking of singing, the Oompa Loompa songs kick so much ass in this movie. They're probably my favorite part of the whole thing because each one has a distinct style while also ripping each of the kids to shreds, with the exception of Veruca, which is more pointed at her parents, unless you want to make the argument that they're saying that she belongs in the trash with her new friends. In which case, fair. If I had to rank them, I'd say Veruca at the bottom, then Violet, then Augustus, and then Mike at the top. But that's barely saying anything because all five songs are excellent. Now, probably the hardest thing about this video was actually finding bad things to say about this movie. And there are two things where, like, I can see it being an issue, but I can also see why it is the way it is. For one thing, I can see some people being put off by Johnny Depp's performance as Willy Wonka and seeing it as maybe a bit weird. But honestly, I feel like that's kind of the point of the character. And another thing that I really like about the movie is that it feels like we're really digging deep into what makes Willy Wonka tick. Like, yeah, he's weird and awkward and out of touch, but that's kind of the point. He locked himself in a factory for years with a bunch of candy obsessed dwarfs. Not only would your fashion sense go out the window, but so would your mind. And at the same time, he has a lot of, resentment towards the parents, but that's also understandable because he had a very crappy childhood. His dad, being an overprotective dentist, literally would not let him indulge in any candy and did not approve of his dreams of becoming a chocolatier, to the point where he violated the warranty and moved his entire house away. I'm not even going to question that, and I'm just going to assume that everything is painted by Wonka's mind. Because honestly, I feel like that's really the point. And I still think that, Johnny Depp as Willy Wonka is charming in a very weird and awkward way. Like, this is a weird movie, but that at least feels in character for a movie made by Tim Burton. And that's another thing I like is that this movie feels like a Tim Burton movie. I don't know what Mel Stewart's style is with movies, so for all I know, that could just be how movies were at the time. But here, it feels like you're watching something that was made by Tim Burton. And I guess Danny Elfman's score also helps, which is always a win. The other thing that I can see turning some people off is that during Mike's introduction, he does unironically use the word retard, which, yeah, that's pretty uncalled for. But hey, if its job was to make me hate Mike TV, it certainly made a real bad first impression, which again, probably supposed to. So honestly, this is the best kind of adaptation, and I guess if you want to call it a remake, I wouldn't stop you. It fixes all the problems that the original movie had while amplifying all the good stuff. So, how do I rate these two movies? For Willy Wonka, I'll go with a 3.5. This is a really good movie for its time, and even really good for now. It holds up surprisingly well, and it absolutely deserves to be considered a classic. It has some issues, but they don't take away from the overall experience. Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, however, gets a 5 out of me. I know I didn't really do a great job of explaining what worked so well about this movie, but that's just because, to put it simply, it does everything that a remake or new adaptation should do. It fixes the problems and makes the strengths even better, while still adding a bunch of new stuff that manages to work, like taking the Oompa Loompa song straight from the book, giving the grandparents an actual role and personality, and even giving a very interesting character study of Willy Wonka. This is one of my new favorite movies. Probably not sure if it's in my top 5, but it's in my top 10 for sure. And I would highly recommend it to anyone who's interested. Both movies are really good. But the newer one is what I'd call a cinematic masterpiece. Now, what about Miscellaneous reviews as a whole? Now, this will be very short. Don't worry, I'm not going to waste your guys' time too much with this. The most that I'll say is that it's on an indefinite hiatus. Like, I don't know when or if I'll bring it back. What I will say for right now is that I will be, bringing the Transformers franchise over to comic book reviews because that franchise is still a major part of my life and I want to continue covering it even if I'm not talking about non-comic book stuff. Especially since I can't guarantee that Miscellaneous reviews will be coming back. For all I know, it could just be discontinued in general. So if that does happen, I at least want to still be able to talk about stuff like Beast Wars, the Bayformers movies, and Transformers 1 without having to put it under a different show. So yeah, that's what's going on with Miscellaneous reviews. Not fully canceled, but for right now, it's on indefinite hiatus. But anyways, guys, that's going to be it for my double review of the Chocolate Factory movies. If you enjoyed, you know what to do. I'm not going to bore you with all the generic stuff. I'll see you guys in the next video. Take care, and Godspeed.